Hello, Spider-Man fans! Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse has finally officially released in theaters. And with the movie now out to the public, it means it is time for us to talk full spoilers for this movie. I'm not only going to be giving you my spoiler review on the film, I'll be giving you my reaction to the ending of this movie. There are no post-credit scenes in here, but we still have a lot to speculate about what they could do in Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse, along with also geeking out about some of the references and Easter eggs in here that connect to the MCU. But it's not just going to be about my Spider opinion. I need you Spider-Man peeps to leave me your thoughts down below. Full on discussion. I need to see your theories, your thoughts, what wowed you about the movie, what surprised you, or what you thought it was lacking. I'll be putting timestamps in the description. If there's certain parts about the movie you want to hear me gush about the most, you can go ahead and get to that. But with that out of the way, let's just dive straight into it here. So just to kind of reiterate my thoughts on this movie, I absolutely loved it. Right now, it is my favorite movie of this year. I had high expectations for this film with how amazing that first one was, and I thought this one met those expectations, and I'm kind of waiting to go back and see it a couple more times before I decide whether it's better or not than the first movie. Clearly, the animation was a fantastic aspect of this movie. I loved all the different art styles they were able to pull off here, some I wasn't even expecting to see. The music choices to me, not only in the soundtrack, but the score, like, really brought things up. Whenever Miguel is chasing Miles, that intense music, a lot like the Prowler in the first movie, I was like, dang, this is nice. But putting the visuals and Spider-Man Easter eggs and references aside, it was the story in here. It was a much more serious story than I was expecting, really tackling and deconstructing a lot of the Spider-Man tropes. And as someone who's been obsessed with the character for the longest, it was just cool to see them take that as a story element and really put it front and center for the audience. We'll definitely get into more detail with that, but starting off with the beginning of the film, I thought the opening was great. A really long opening, like 15-20 minutes before the title even pops up on screen, really focusing in on Gwen Stacy. I love how they gave Haley Steinfeld's Gwen Stacy a lot more to do in here. She wasn't just the love interest to Miles Morales, just being in there to flirt up with him. The way they recap the events of the first movie with her drum solo tagged along with the animation, I was just like, oh, this is beautiful. I even like how they expanded further on her origin, you know, about becoming Spider-Woman and then what happens to her Peter Parker of her universe. It always kind of bugged me how into the Spider-Verse we really only got like 10 to 15 seconds of her origin, then we had to jump back into the story. I loved how Across the Spider-Verse took the time to go, no, this is how her origin went down. This is how tragic her story is, a lot like the other Spider people. She lost someone important to her, and it was a catalyst to why she doesn't want to share her identity to her father. I just had no idea how vital that specific Spider-Man trope was going to become throughout the rest of the movie. And here's where I want to address something I've seen some people complain about, and I completely understand. The movie ends on a cliffhanger, a wild one that I do want to get into more detail about towards the end of this video, but it left people going, man, there was no resolution in this film. It's an incomplete movie. It's very much a part one. And although we knew that from the beginning, it left people with a sour taste. Like, I don't know if I can call this the best Spider-Man movie because there was no resolution. But I think that's because everyone is really looking at it from Miles' point of view. We wanted a resolution to that story and what they left us off with, but Across the Spider-Verse is very much Gwen Stacy's movie. There's a reason she's the beginning and the end of the movie. When you go back and see the film, notice Gwen Stacy is the first and last thing you'll see. The movie opens up with her leaving her band, still feeling isolated in this world, revealing her identity to her father, and how all those issues cause her to run away from her problems into this spider society where she just wants to stay there, not even caring if she ever goes back to her own universe. She's a spider person running away from her problems, avoiding her responsibilities. But by the end of the movie, her arc is completed. She finds her new band, that being some of the new and old friends she's made from the past two movies, getting ready to go save Miles. She also reconciles her relationship with her father and comes to peace with that, and she learns again what her responsibility as a spider person is. That's where this movie had a resolution and a closing chapter, and I thought did the cliffhanger ending well, because although they set up a lot of unanswered questions for the next movie, that part of the movie I thought they closed off nicely. It wasn't like the Fast X situation where I can't even believe I'm comparing Fast and Furious to Spider-Verse, but as the most recent part one cliffhanger ending movie, that film just kind of ends. There is no closing chapter or finishing of some stories or arcs. It's just, oh, this is where we're finished, come back in 2 years to see the rest. But again, that's just how I view it. I totally understand the frustrations of wanting to see that story complete and having to wait Who knows, man? It took us 5 years to get this sequel. Better not take us 5 years to get beyond. But after that long opening, we get to Miles Morales in here. And here's where I thought it was weird that the movie decided to recap again the events of the first movie. Like, Gwen just did such a great job with that drum solo recapping Into the Spider-Verse. I don't know why they felt the need to do that all over again with Miles. I felt like they could have just jumped into him being Spider-Man, doing his duties, trying to get to school in this meeting, but also trying to stop this villain. I felt like that would have got the message across. He's struggling to balance both lives, as typical Spider people do. But as we're in Miles' universe, I was not expecting how much time we were going to be spending with the family dynamic, with the struggle. I thought it was going to be like maybe 1 or 2 scenes, Gwen comes in and boom bada bing, he's with the Spider Society now. No, we were with Miles for like a good almost hour of the movie, and I'm not complaining. I like that development. It's stuff that's gonna really pay off in the next film. Across the Spider-Verse is very much laying the groundwork and doing all the heavy lifting so Beyond can just kind of go crazy. But just some small details when we were with Miles. I love whenever a movie can show us a Spider-Man fighting off some street level crime. That's always fun. Just random wacky villains that pop up. There was even a moment in here where the movie gave Miles his own thinking spot. If you remember in No Way Home, each Spider person has a place where they go to just kind of think and be by themselves.
Is there some place he might go that has meaning to him, where he would go to just
get away from everything?
For me, it was the top of the Chrysler Building.
Empire State. It's a better view.
So I thought that was kind of a nice added touch. Miles gets his own building. I felt like the movie also did a great job of addressing some criticisms before watching the film. Like, I wasn't a big fan of his new suit. When I first saw it in the trailers and whatnot, I thought, I'm not really a fan. I wish they went back to the old suit. And repeatedly in this movie, it's an inside joke that people are like, you bleeding from your armpits? What's this? Oh, we'll get you a new suit, man. Don't worry about it. But even with me not liking it in the trailers, in the actual movie, the suit looks fantastic. And well, also during Miles' part of the story, we get introduced to the Spot. This is where I definitely want to talk a lot about this villain, because I think back to when they were first introduced. We got that first look photo and they said, oh, the Spot will be a villain in Across the Spider-Verse. I, like a lot of people, thought, oh, that's cool. That's a nice side villain they'll throw in there. He'll probably be a henchman to the bigger, real bad guy of this movie. And then later on we find out, no, he's the big bad guy of the next two. And you're like, the Spot, really? Okay. And again, the movie plays into that joke. Miles calls him the villain of the week, or like a minor villain that is just an annoyance more than an actual threat. And because Across the Spider-Verse is all about deconstructing Spider-Man stories, breaking away from that formula and mold, the Spot really took offense to that. He's like, you think I'm a villain of the week? You think I'm not threatening? I'm gonna show you how threatening I can be. And progressively, although this was a very jokey, funny villain, voiced by Jason Schwartzman, who did a fantastic job, I like that they kind of subverted expectations and took someone you didn't really think was much of a villain, but the expansion on their powers and what they're gonna be capable of made them a very big threat. Even just the way the movie goes back and playing into the origin of the Spot, we heard early on that the Spot has a special connection to Miles, and we were all wondering, okay, what could that be? I was not expecting him to be the henchman that got hit by a bagel in Into the Spider-Verse. That was actually pretty funny. Someone so insignificant that you never think would be somebody turns out to be a big part of this movie. Not even just that, but it turns out he's the scientist that brought in the spider that bit Miles. There were so many theories about that spider when the first movie came out because it was glitchy and it came and bit Miles. So people are like, does this spider even belong in this universe? What's the story behind that? And I thought maybe they were just gonna ignore it. I love that they gave it the backstory of this spider belonged to a different Spider-Man. It was supposed to bite somebody else in Earth 42, but it bit you, Miles, and you're the original anomaly. And because the spider ended up biting Miles, it disrupted things and caused his Spider-Man to die that was actually never supposed to. That is a major mind F right there. I did not expect that to be part of the storytelling in here. Miles is such a critical figure in this multiverse story. We'll get into more of that in a sec. I definitely want to talk about some of the standout new Spider-Man characters in here. Starting off with Indian Spider-Man, Pavitar Pavarkar. Wow, he was a lot of fun. I love the energy and vibrancy of his world. The way he was like poking fun at Miles and Gwen's relationship in here. He just instantly became a very likable and welcoming member of the Spider-Verse. And in fact, I want to dive further into it because I thought it was pretty interesting how his Spider-Man is extremely happy, is extremely go-lucky. It felt like his life is perfect as Spider-Man. Like Miles and Gwen gave us small comments about the struggles of being Spider-Man and some of the issues they've had, and Pavitar Pavarkar is just like, oh, what are you talking about, man? This job is great, man. I got a girlfriend, I got a city to save, I got these awesome powers. What y'all complaining about? And then the movie introduces Canon Events, and that's where I, as a Spider-Man fan, were like, oh my goodness, they are doing this. His Spider-Man had not gone through the tragedy that most Spider people had gone through, so his life was kind of perfect as Spider-Man. He's supposed to go through that event where he loses a Captain Stacy in his life. That's a canon event that most Spider people go through, and I loved even when Miguel O'Hara was explaining the canon events, we got those cameos. Andrew Garfield front and center in one of my favorite moments in that first Amazing Spider-Man movie where he loses his Captain Stacy. They use that as the example there, and even that the death of Uncle Ben is another canon event that a lot of Spider people go through, showing off the Tobey Maguire footage. Even though it's just recycled footage from the previous movies, it is so awesome that Sony can take something that happened long ago and yet make it fit into the narrative of this animated movie. And that's not the only thing Sony kind of fixes in here. Remember Morbius? I know, I can't believe we're bringing that up during this spoiler review. But we were all like befuddled, confused, and thinking, why the heck, after No Way Home, when everything was fixed in the crack in the multiverse, it didn't make sense for the Vulture to randomly leave the MCU to go to the Sonyverse where he just has this awkward interaction with Morbius. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse just fixed that plot hole because Miles Morales is the anomaly and technically not supposed to be existing and kind of breaking loose the multiverse where different villains related to Spider-Man are going into different worlds, just like the medieval Vulture was attacking Gwen Stacy's world. This now kind of explains why the Vulture just randomly left the MCU into a different universe. It's a completely separate anomaly than what happened in No Way Home and has nothing to do with Tom Holland or Doctor Strange's spell. It's because of Miles Morales. Oh my goodness, Sony, you fixing things? How you doing this? But no, the introduction of these canon events and what they mean for Spider people, so much we can dive into with that. Still, I do want to go back to praising standout Spider-Verse characters. Spider-Punk in here, Hobie Brown. I'm gonna be straight honest with you guys. The first like 5, maybe 10 minutes of Hobie Brown being in the movie, I did not like the dude. I was kind of mad. I was getting a little jealous for my boy Miles Morales and thinking, oh God, this guy's gonna steal your girl. I felt like he was even kind of giving Miles the cold shoulder at first, or being a real standout, I don't belong here kind of vibe, which is very much Spider-Punkish, okay? In his comics, he's one of those fight the government, stand for the people kind of person, and that's great. But thankfully, as the movie went on, he really won me over and became my favorite new Spider-Person introduced in this world. Like, his animation style alone was so cool in the way they had him just changing every couple of seconds, but how right away he never really felt right being part of this spider society. He was always stealing little tech, and we think that's kind of weird, and really he was just building his own multiverse watch, and then deciding to take the side of Miles and realizing that he's right in this situation, that we need to be able to save as many people as we can. Man, were they able to do such a faithful version of Spider-Punk that made sense within this movie. Miguel O'Hara in here, you know, I was kind of iffy with them making him sort of the villain of this film, but I thought they did enough to explain why he's so angry at Miles and why he really wants to stop him. The story they gave him in here is that, you know, he discovers the multiverse and he found a universe where a version of him died. So then he decides to replace that version of himself in there where he has a family, a daughter, but because he's technically never supposed to exist in that world, it ends up crumbling and destroying that entire universe. And then that's his reasoning for why these canon events like an Uncle Ben dying or a Captain Stacy dying are things that need to happen whether we like it or not, because it means a whole universe could die. But even, I'll be honest guys, even with that like logical understanding that that's what's at stake here, and that's why he's very pissed at Miles, and when they inform him, in 2 days, your dad is gonna die, Miles. And it's a canon event that's unavoidable, it needs to happen, and if you try and stop it, it could mean your universe collapses and everybody dies. It still kind of felt weird to me so many spider people in that society just went along with it. Like even Peter B. Parker in here, that again, I loved him, man. I'm glad he's a father. All the little interactions he had with little Mayday and how he's one of those annoying people always wanting to show you pictures and talk about their kid. Oh, it's so good to see a Peter Parker like that. So long in the comics and other media, they never want to let Peter Parker grow up. They focus too much on just tragedy, tragedy, tragedy. So it's kind of nice to see him as a father, and even the conflict he would have with Miles. Miles felt betrayed by Peter B. Parker, his mentor. And so I found myself in the theater going, how could Peter B. Parker be okay with just letting Miles' dad die? I think it was a lot easier for those other spider people in the room to just go along with it because they already went through their tragic event. They already lost their their respective Uncle Bens, their respective Gwen Stacy's or Captain Stacy's, and they knew, as tragic as those events were, it's what shaped them to be a better Spider-Man to save more people later on. So it really is just conflicting, and I myself don't know what the best solution is. That's why I'm so curious to what they're gonna do in Beyond the Spider-Verse, because, okay, let's say Miles does save his dad. Doesn't that then mean your world's gonna start collapsing like Indian Spider-Man's world? Miguel said there's a chance they can save that universe, but there's no guarantee. And I think that's gonna be the really interesting part about Beyond the Spider-Verse, is how important some of these tragic events are that shape you. Because going back to like Indian Spider-Man, he was a perfectly happy-go-lucky Spider-Man. Him losing that Captain Stacy and then having that relationship broken with his girlfriend in there, because now he can never reveal his identity to her, because it's gonna be just like the Harry Osborn Green Goblin situation in the Tobey Maguire movies, or even kind of like the Gwen Stacy and Captain Stacy situation with Andrew. Those people sometimes blame Spider-Man for those deaths, and it's what makes them want to shield their identity and shape them further. Miles kind of robbed Indian Spider-Man of that development in Spider-Man. Does that now mean Indian Spider-Man is destined to be a bad Spider-Man? Not like evil bad, but I just mean because he didn't have that tragic event that weighted him and shaped him, is he now never going to reach his full potential as Spider-Man? I hope I'm making sense, but that is kind of like some of the brilliant parts of this movie. But before we dive into that giant jaw-dropping cliffhanger ending, a couple of cameos or things that happen in here I for sure want to talk about that made me like jump up and clap. Obviously, not going to talk about every single Easter egg, cameo, and reference in there because we would be here all day, especially since a lot of those we had already talked about in like trailer breakdowns and stuff like that, like all the hidden spider people in the back. But the ones that really got the spotlight for me is like, one, I'm glad Spectacular Spider-Man actually got some dialogue in the movie, even if it was just one line. They brought in the original voice actor from the show, Josh Keane, or at least I believe that's him. As someone who loves Spectacular Spider-Man and was so devastated when it was canceled, it's just nice that he got a little appreciation in here. Also, PlayStation Spider-Man, he gets like one little line in there in the video game section of the Spider-Verse. Although there's like a dozen others PS5 Spider-Mans in the background, it was nice that they gave us like a 3D model version of him. Also, the Lego Spider-Man universe was unexpected but really funny. It was great also that they threw in voice clips of J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson all throughout the movie. That made me smile. But really, the biggest Easter egg I was not expecting at all, blew my mind but had me so happy, Donald Glover as the Prowler showing up as his MCU character. At least I hope that's the MCU Prowler. Now, there's a lot of interesting angles with this Easter egg. For one, Donald Glover is usually credited as the inspiration for Miles Morales. Brian Michael Bendis, who created Miles Morales back in 2011, said he was watching an episode of Community where Donald Glover wore a Spider-Man shirt, and then that inspired him to create the character. And that's why we see that same clip show up in Into the Spider-Verse. I remember at one point there was even rumors he would play a live-action Spider-Man, but now he's a little too old for that. And then, of course, in Spider-Man Homecoming, he plays Uncle Aaron, Miles' uncle, the Prowler, where at one point there's even an Easter egg saying his alias is the Prowler in that universe. We thought that was the biggest hint ever that Miles would someday show up in the MCU, but it's been several movies later and we haven't gotten that. So now bringing it forward here, they have him in the full live-action Prowler costume that I gotta say looked really sweet. The chest emblem, the claw hands, oh, he looked great. Even liked his facial hair and haircut he had. Man was looking sharp. And just like the villains are being pulled in and out of different universes, I hope that this is the biggest hint that we're about to see live-action Prowler in Tom Holland's Spider-Man 4 that'll then bring us in to a live-action Miles Morales. Sony has already confirmed this week they're planning a live-action Miles Morales movie, and since he's already been set up in the MCU, this could be that stepping stone towards it. So again, I hope that's not just like a random fun cameo throwaway. I really hope that's like a small tease setup for the MCU and not a Sony spin-off universe movie, man. Come on now, don't do that, Sony. But now talking about the very end of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. So through it all, when Miles is done getting chased by hundreds to thousands of spider people, and pretty crazy that Miles was able to evade all of them, even his like one-to-one with Miguel and the speech he gave them before he shocks out his suit, I was like, oh, that's such a sweet moment. He jumps into this scanning device that looks at his DNA and sends him to his correct universe. But because he was bitten by a spider from a different universe, the machine accidentally sends him to that universe instead, Earth 42. And man, I should have known something was up, because the minute he got into that world, I was like, oh, Okay, did they just like bump up the graphics card in here? Everything looks so crisp, clean. Love the rain, love the glows and designs of everything in this world. I don't remember his universe looking like this, but okay, it's nighttime, neon lights might be different. And then Miles goes into what he thinks is his bedroom, reveals to his mother, hey, I'm Spider-Man. She's like, what's a Spider-Man? What are you talking about, mijo? He's in the universe where a Spider-Man doesn't exist. But shocking reveal doesn't end there. The Prowler, his uncle, is alive. And his uncle isn't the Prowler, but instead, it's this world's Miles Morales, who is the Prowler with braided hair and a mean attitude. And then that's kind of where the movie ends things off, setting us up that Miles has to fight an evil version of himself where his dad is also dead in this universe. And instead it looks like Miles was raised by his uncle and mother. And man, I love that ending, and I was so sad it ended right there. I could have had that movie go on for like 3 more hours. I love the idea of having an evil Miles Morales. We see so many different variants and versions of Peter Parker or Gwen Stacy or other Spider people. I don't think there's that many different versions of a Miles Morales in the Spider-Verse, at least not in the comics or what we've seen so far. So for Across the Spider-Verse to kind of create an evil version of Miles, I think is so unique and even smarter to make him this world's Prowler. Also, by the way, did you guys peep that he has Prowler Nikes? Yo, I have the Air Jordans from there. I can't wait till they release those Prowler Nikes. I'm gonna rock those too. But so for Beyond the Spider-Verse, it looks like Gwen Stacy rounds up a group of people who believe in their cause, that we can't just let someone we love die because that's a canon event. We're supposed to be the good guys, and if we can save somebody, we're gonna do that. And the team is also looking great. I was kind of sad we didn't get a lot of Spider-Man Noir or Spider-Ham in this movie, but it looks like we definitely are gonna get them in the next one because they're part of the new team, along with Indian Spider-Man, Spider-Punk, and Spider-Bite, the virtual reality Spider-Person. And Penny Parker, whose suit looks way more comic accurate than her first iteration. I really wish Scarlet Spider-Man was able to join the team. I know some people are upset he was turned into like a dorky goof who was brooding and dark and my origin story is tragic, but I actually kind of like that. I thought Andy Samberg killed it. I still hope we get to see some of him in Beyond. But now that we know that's the direction of Beyond, I mean, we have to start wondering, how are they going to resolve this issue? What is the resolution here? How are things going to end? Because any way I look at it, there's a major problem with it. If they save the dad, okay, fine. But now that universe could collapse. I've seen some theories that because technically Miles isn't supposed to exist as a Spider-Person, the rules don't apply to him and saving his dad isn't going to affect anything. I'm like, fine, but that doesn't stop the other thousands of Spider people we have out there with canon events coming up. We're just going to let those Spider people go through that stuff, especially if we have a device that tells us when their people are going to die. There's also like a loophole you can maybe do to get out of it. We saw with Gwen Stacy and her dad just quit being captain of the force, so now he's not a Captain Stacy and is no longer destined to die in her world. Is Miles really going to convince his dad to be like, yo, dad, just quit the force, go be a detective or something else? Trust me, we want you to live. That would be so anticlimactic if they took the loophole route. What I think is going to happen in Beyond the Spider-Verse is Miles is going to come to terms with that, yeah, he's gonna have to let his dad die, whether he likes it or not, because of evil Miles Morales. That version of him is a perfect example why tragic events sometimes need to happen to Spider people. Maybe I'm sounding crazy here, but I mean, look at it that way. That Miles didn't have his father to raise him, to show him the ropes, to teach him about responsibility. Instead, he was raised by Uncle Aaron, and that might be Miles's overarching thing in this movie. But again, even me saying that just sounds so weird. Miles letting his dad die. Like, that doesn't feel Spider-Man-ish, but I also just don't know how this story could go. Aside from that, there's other deeper things you could dive into. Miles could now look for the person that was originally supposed to get bitten by that spider in that world, whether that was a Peter Parker or it was supposed to be him as Spider-Man in that universe. It's also going to be interesting to see all the different variant versions of Spider-Man villains in that world, because I bet they're going to be a lot more powerful, a lot more bigger threats, since they never had a Spider-Man to put them in their place or put them in jail. I mean, we saw just from that look in New York City, it is in ruins because there's no Spider-Person there. The other big thing I think is going to have to happen somehow, some way, Tom Holland's got to get involved, man. I feel like there was a big lack of Tom Holland cameoing or referencing in this movie. Sure, there was that one line where Miguel O'Hara says, oh, that little brat from Earth 999 and Doctor Strange, don't even get me started. But with the way they showed off Toby and Andrew in this movie and not showing any footage of Tom Holland's world or his universe other than maybe that Prowler thing, I feel like he could show up in here and be a helpful guy. I mean, there was one sequence in here where the Spot goes into Mrs. Chang's grocery store, showing we could have live action scenes scenes, and here's the Sony universe for you. Peter has already gone through his canon version of losing a parental figure, his Uncle Ben, which was actually his Aunt May. He's also kind of familiar with the multiverse now, so he's not even going to be that shocked or surprised when another Spider-Man shows up and says, you need to help us. I mean, same goes for Tobey and Andrew. It'd be awesome to have them in there too, but I understand if you only want to do Tom Holland. But my final big theory with Beyond the Spider-Verse, and I feel like this is how they'll address everything, with this whole multiverse travel, there's also a way for you to time travel. Think back to Into the Spider-Verse, and whenever that Collider event happened where it scanned Spider-Man, so then it sent different Spider people from all universes into Miles' world. Well, while a lot of them came around the same time, remember Gwen Stacy actually came a week before almost everybody else, and she was trapped in Miles' world trying to figure out what happened. Meaning there is a way for you to use that super collider and multiverse travel device to also go back in time.
I was blown into last week. My spider sense told me to head to Vision's Academy. Wasn't sure why until I met you.
That could be the resolution that happens in here. Whenever they said his Spider-Man wasn't supposed to die in Miles' universe, I'm like, well, we gotta correct that then. That's kind of messed up. So I feel like the movie could end with them somehow going back to before Miles got bit, erasing that event, letting his Spider-Person live, not letting all these anomalies in the multiverse happen. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, Chris, really? Why would they end it that way? Where then Miles doesn't get to be Spider-Man? Oh, Miles was still meant to be Spider-Man. He just became it too early and was bitten by a spider from the wrong dimension. The movie could end with Miles making that sacrifice to give up his powers, to give up his place as Spider-Man, but I think he was still someone always meant to be Spider-Man and will be bitten by a spider in his universe, and that's how the movie could end. We have his Spider-Man alive. He also gets to become Spider-Man. He learned the responsibility through that journey and adventure, and he's no longer an anomaly that's not supposed to exist. That would be the clean-cut way to do it, since again, these are animated PG films, and that's kind of how you want to end things. You don't always want to be true tragic. This movie was pretty dark. I'm gonna be surprised if they go even darker in the next one, but I welcome it. I know some of you might not love that theory, but that's the one I would have. I'm still really excited to see what else would happen here. I love this movie, and it just gets me so excited thinking of all the possibilities that could happen in Beyond the Spider-Verse. This is where I throw it off to you guys. You saw Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. What theories of mine do you think are good, or do you think are completely dumb? What you loved about the movie, what you hated? I want to hear all about it down below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at 3C Films or on TikTok at 3C Films. But as always, I'm Chris. Take care.